earthquakes in the context of climate change. So here's more of Hostin's embarrassing moment as her co-host tried to reel her back in as she says something that's wholly inaccurate. Let's watch.
I mean, I have to say, Karen Dupiche, our wonderful, wonderful makeup artist, when the earthquake was happening, she put her coat on and she was like, Jesus is coming. I'm out. I'm out. I'm leaving. We've got a solar eclipse. We've got the earthquake. She ran down the hallway.
The rapture is here.
Rapture's here. And then also I learned that cicadas are coming.
Cicadas.
For the first time in like 100 years. No. Two different. Well, this is what I read.
There's two different kinds of cicadas.
Two different times are coming.
The good cicadas and the bad
cicadas. For the first time in many, many years.
No, every 17 years this happens.
Well, that's not what I read, but maybe, maybe you know better. But I will say all those things together would maybe lead one to believe that, either climate change exists or something is really returning.
Earthquakes are not at the mercy of climate change. It's underground.
It happens. And the eclipse, they've known about the eclipse coming because eclipses happen, and they actually can say when these things are going to happen. So all these folks who are saying, it's a sign from God, God doesn't give you warning.
Oh, that was bad. That was really bad.
Yeah. Pausing.
Look, the eclipse has nothing to do with climate change.
Zero.
Earthquake has nothing to do with climate change. What are we doing?
So, guys, politics, unfortunately, is a lot about fear. Never use it for fear-mongering, especially if you're in media. I get it. I get the politicians. But our job is to call out the politicians that are using it in that context. But Sunny Hostin and a lot of folks in the mainstream, et cetera, having to do with climate change, that didn't have anything to do with climate change. Tons of things. We tell you here, the hurricanes, extreme storms, the rising of there's no off switch on fear-mongering. So that's why she's going to earthquakes, eclipses, cicadas, et cetera, having to do with climate change. That didn't have anything to do with climate change. Tons of things. We tell you here, the hurricanes, extreme storms, the rising of the oceans, et cetera, are related to climate change because they're driven by the hot temperatures and the hot water and the oceans cooling, et cetera.
Right.
But earthquakes
is it makes viewers who are informed about what actually causes an eclipse or what actually causes an earthquake to hear what Hostin is saying there and really question whether they've been lied to about the severity of climate change or whether there have been lies about climate change being tied to other things that it wasn't actually tied to, right? And I agree with you, Jake. Obviously, there is reality behind climate change, but you start losing trust among your audience when you tie climate change to things that you really have no business tying it to. So as we know, the eclipse that occurred today that made a lot of news, people were talking about it all day, has to do with the moon passing between the sun and the earth, and it temporarily blocks the sun. That has nothing to do with climate change. Climate change has nothing to do with earthquakes. Earthquakes are caused by a sudden movement along faults within the earth.
Tectonic plate movement.
Yeah.
That's right.
What the hell does climate change have to do with earthquakes? Well, generally speaking, nothing. If you look at the symptoms of climate change, typically you won't see earthquakes mentioned because earthquakes are not a direct symptom of climate change. However, to say that earthquakes have nothing to do with climate change would not be entirely accurate. Climate change can influence seismic activity. There's a few different factors. It has to do with permafrost. Also, there's something to do with water accumulating at dams, adding more weight to the ground, which can influence seismic activity. And there's also the melting of the glaciers. I'm not an expert at this. However, I'm not the one running a major news network getting paid to do this. I don't get paid to do this, right? But I'm willing to spend at least a few seconds of time doing some basic research, trying to see if there's any potential connection between climate change and earthquakes. So ironically, TYT is making fun of The View for talking out of their ass about things, while TYT talks out of their ass about things. Now, it's kind of a little bit more complicated than that because, again, as I said, earthquakes are not a direct thing with climate change. However, climate change can influence earthquakes. So that's kind of like a little gray area. So if they did some research, but just really surface level research, then they might do like what are the symptoms of climate change, and they would see things like they mentioned. I think they said something about hurricanes and I guess temperatures or whatever they mentioned. Right, there'd be a standard list, but again, and this is the danger when we had the pandemic and people talking about medical, topics and don't have, that skill set, right? That's how you get a lot of misinformation, whether it's come from the right wing or the left wing. So, I don't have an expertise in this area, and neither does TYT. So, if they're not careful, they could actually end up spreading misinformation. But I noticed that the way they speak with such confidence, like, oh, that's nothing to do with earthquakes, climate change, it's so embarrassing, I think the focus is too much on, you know, I don't know if like being above it all is what I wanted to say, but basically, you know, being superior to mainstream media, right? Look at the mainstream media; they're such idiots. Oh my goodness! Unlike us, like we're real journalists, right? And also, I think part of it is, the right wing likes to go after the left, and you guys are spreading you are the ones spreading misinformation and stuff. You're saying that's lies, and this climate change stuff is false or whatever it is. And I think TYT really enjoys, if any of that is true at all, for them to be the ones to point it out, right? So that's such a focus, like, it brings them such joy to be able to be like, we're honest, and we're not partisan left wingers who so blind and whatever. Like we're balanced, we're fair and balanced, right? So when the left says nonsense about climate change, we're the ones who are actually willing to call it out. We'll call it our side, unlike the right, which is a valid sentiment. I mean, it's very rare that you see right wingers going after right wingers, unless you got the Israel situation. That's like hell freezing over. So very, very interesting indeed. Now, with that being said, is it likely that Sunny is aware of the connection between climate change and earthquakes? Very unlikely. I wasn't aware. I had to do the research, right? So I don't think she's aware. I think she was kind of talking out her ass, just like TYT's kind of talking out of their ass. And additionally, I think she kind of jumbled up her thoughts. She had a general sense. I'm making assumptions here, of course, but she had a general sentiment of all these things happening, right? And it's like, we have these cicators. I don't know what she said. She said cicadas. I don't know what she said. However she pronounced it. You got the cicadas coming in, and then we got earthquake, and then we got an eclipse. So I don't know if she was looking at really earthquakes and cicadas as a climate change thing, and she didn't necessarily think about what she was saying to directly add earthquakes in there. Like she may have just been speaking loosely, like all these changes in the environment, it kind of feels like climate change stuff. So I don't know. I think I'm reading a little bit too much into it to get into that level of analysis of what she meant to say. But I really doubt that she's aware of the connection between earthquakes. So essentially you could give TYT, you could say, well, hey, TYT was probably correct in calling Sunny out. It's not that Sunny knew the connection with earthquakes. Sunny probably doesn't know the connection of earthquakes to climate change, and she was talking out her ass, so that would make TYT correct to call her out for just, speaking with loose lips. But TYT themselves kind of got caught up in that way. But I think it's a potential that TYT got caught up in that way just because of the lack of expertise. So again, they could have done research, but if you just do surface level research, again, you're going to find the typical climate change symptoms, which would probably not include earthquakes. All right. So to find a connection between climate change and earthquakes, you have to dig a little bit deeper than probably TYT is willing to do. And my thing is, knowing that you're talking about a scientific topic and this is not your expertise, I think have a little bit of humility, right? You do your research and it seems to indicate a certain thing, share that information, but getting so snarky and, so embarrassing, like, you don't need all that, TYT. You don't need all that. Like, when you talk about something that's not your expertise, you don't need all that. Now, if you talk about politics, now you guys have enough experience that you should be able to, have that kind of an attitude if you choose to on certain things when you're calling out other people, but not on science. Don't get so snooty on science, man. I have much more of a scientific background than they do, and I can't be snooty like that because, again, I didn't even know that there was a connection with earthquakes. I had to look that up, right? So whenever you're dealing with stuff that's not your thing, tone it down a little bit. Be a little bit more humble, all right? This is the Baby Channel. The Baby comment section below. Click on the like button, subscribe, smash that bell. Be well.